Welcome to In the News for November the 18th, 2022. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. It is so good to be back. We had to miss last week, but in the interim, while I was gone, happy birthday to iPhone JD. 14 years, my friend. I always enjoy these posts that you do where you go through and talk about like the top posts from the past year, as well as even more interesting, the top visitors to iPhone JD over the last year.
Always funny. And it's interesting, 14 years. I mean, part of me still feels like we just started using the iPhone.
I know.
The iPhone itself came out 15 years ago. I've been writing about it for 14 years. Time certainly flies. So it's interesting. It's thank you, and it was fun.
This is good. Yeah.
I was celebrating a birthday. You your legs still must be tired, because I cannot believe what you were doing last week when we skipped having the recording.
It was
the podcast.
Pretty incredible. Yeah.
Tell everybody where you were, because it's for those of you looking at video, you can see a little bit of it behind you.
I do. I have a picture behind me of myself taking a picture on Guadalupe Peak, which is in West Texas. It's about 2 hours east of El Paso, Texas. If any of you know your Texas geography, a friend of mine. So I'm originally from Texas, and an old friend of mine. We both grew up in Texas, and he always had this dream that he wanted to go to the Guadalupe National Park. It's a national park, and he wanted to climb to the top of Texas. So it just happened that he was coming from another business trip. I was coming from Chicago on a business trip, and then we were both going our separate ways. But we had 3 days, or like 3.5, 4 days, where we were able to converge together in El Paso, and we had this crazy idea that we were going to spend 4 days in the Guadalupe National Park, hiking out of the backcountry, taking all of our camping equipment and water, since there was no water that's available out there. And then at the very end, which was last Sunday, we hiked all the way up to the Guadalupe Peak, which is about a 4-hour hike up. It's 8,700 feet. And it was just insane. The whole experience was great. But to put the technology spin on it, my friend, it was wonderful to have both, not just my iPhone 14, just for the pictures, and I used the AllTrails app and the GPS capability, but I also had my Apple Watch Ultra, which, I felt like it actually justified the purchase for having the Ultra. But while I probably in no way, put it to the test as what a regular like Arctic Explorer would be putting to, I have to tell you, the Apple Watch Ultra did come in very handy for a myriad of different tasks, like using the compass. I did it, to track my workout, all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun. It was grueling. It was brutal. But, as in most of those things, it was very rewarding. The sights were just absolutely incredible.
You did some pretty insane hiking for miles and miles and miles.
Right.
Brett and I, for those of you who don't know, we are, in the health app, you can choose to voluntarily share your health, it's not your health, your activity
right.
data with somebody else.
Yeah,
and so
right.
Brett and I,
I
don't know if compete is an exaggeration, but if I have a good workout, Brett could see it. And if Brett has a good
right.
workout. And so I will mention about a week ago, I just happened to jump into the app and I saw it was no data from you for like 2 days. So I'm like, either you're completely off the grid or you're dead, one of the two. And those could be perhaps you're off the grid and dead
right.
at the same time, but you're
right, pretty much.
Not,
yes.
You'd make it down from the top of the peak of the mountain. And so then a couple of days later, once you must have actually, gotten back onto the grid and it uploaded your data connections, I saw these insane hikes that you were doing for hours and hours and hours and miles and miles. And I just can't even imagine it. But so you're completely off the grid. You've got your Apple Watch with you. You have your iPhone, but of course there's no cellular connection. So so you were telling me before, this is where the app that you used, you would that app has the trails downloaded, because obviously you can't get the maps live from
right.
the internet. So that way all of your trails are downloaded locally on your iPhone.
Exactly. I know that I mentioned this. I think it was one of my picks a few months ago, Jeff.
Right.
The All Trails app, which is a wonderful app, and you can get it for free. Then there's like a pro version, which I upgraded to, because one of the things the pro version does is allow you to download those maps. So I didn't need like real time updates or anything. I just know that I needed to make sure that we were staying on the actual trail.
Because your GPS still worked. So
exactly.
It's just you needed to have the map, right?
And I will tell you just quickly on the iPhone, several things that I did on the iPhone. Number one, I went into airplane mode, right? Because I didn't want it to constantly try to, that
would just waste your battery, right? Yeah.
Exactly, Jeff. I also went in, and there were times when I went into low power mode on the iPhone. I didn't do that all the time. I didn't feel like I needed to all the time. I did take a battery with me. So maybe about in 2 days, in between the trip, in the middle of the trip, I did charge it up a little bit, just to kind of top it off there, which was great. But batteries are heavy to carry, by the way, along with everything else. The other thing that I did is, I will tell you, I went in and turned off the raise to wake option there, right? I take that for granted because I'm constantly using my phone, in the real world situation, not in the mountains. And I love to just be able to pull, hold pick the phone up, and then it just wakes up, and then I can unlock it if I need to. I think I also turned off the always on screen, right? Which is with the iPhone 14. So I really went in and tried to turn off a lot of the things on the phone. But even in airplane mode, I don't think a lot of people know this, that the GPS radio does still work. And so the way that we were able to navigate very, very well, by the way, is I had a downloaded All Trails map, which, again, you pointed this out. I could have done the same with maybe, Google Maps or even an Apple Maps, but I wanted to use the All Trails because I knew it would have specifically the trails that we were going to follow.
It's tailored for the trail, right?
Exactly. Right. We had already mapped all that out. And so when I went in the All Trails app, there is a navigate function. And when you turn that on, it literally is just pinging the GPS coordinates, and it doesn't have to do it constantly, right? It would do it every few minutes or so, but it was more than sufficient for us to be able to say, yes, we're on the trail. Because sometimes you see trails that branch off, or in the case where we were in some of the backcountry, you couldn't even see the trail. Like, we were like, does that looks like a trail? It could be a trail, but it was incredibly helpful. And a couple of times we realized we were a little bit off the trail because we're like, this doesn't quite look right, and I would bring up my phone and I would check it, and we were able to backtrack just a little bit. I actually didn't use the backtrack function on the Apple Watch. That's one of the things that I did not use, just because honestly, we had the downloaded apps.
You knew the trail.
Maps.
I mean, backtrack would make more sense if you went off trail and you were trying to, navigate.
We were not doing that.
Right.
We were not doing that this time on there. So I have to tell you just quickly on the iPhone itself. Again, it was just a lifesaver. Again, I wanted to have battery with me just to top it off, but turning all of those things off that I mentioned earlier, Jeff, it really was surprising how well that it lasted, because I would just constantly check it. I'm just nervous nanny like that. But that was great on the iPhone. And then, of course, just being able to take incredible pictures, raw images and 4K video. I mean, some of the stuff that I was taking is just insane. Some of the sites that we saw. So that was good.
Tell me about the Apple Watch Ultra. So how did the battery hold up? What were some of the things that were useful when you were on the trail?
Incredible. In fact, and I might come back to this as one of my tips, but in the Apple Watch, there is now a low power mode. I think before it was just a power reserve or something, right? That would kind of kick on automatically. But with watchOS 9, I think, Jeff, that you could go into a low power mode. Anyway, I did that. I swiped up, I tapped on my battery percentage, and there was a low power mode. So I did that on my Apple Watch. And also on the Apple Watch Ultra, I could go into the workout settings, and there is a separate low power mode toggle, or two, I believe, that would say, hey, we're only going to check your heart rate every few minutes, as opposed to maybe every few seconds or something like that. So I did that because I knew at this point I'm not doing, HIIT workouts or anything like that. It was just, I needed you just to periodically check on me on the trail to make sure I'm still alive and to make sure, that I wanted to keep track of that. That worked spectacularly on any of that. And of course, when I went into low power mode, the cellular connection was turned off, the Wi-Fi, all of that was pinged off so that it wasn't, running down the battery. Jeff, with all of those settings turned on, my Apple Watch Ultra lasted me all 4 days. I think when I got back on the plane in El Paso, we started Thursday, so it would have been Thursday morning when I got off the plane, and then when I got back on the plane Sunday afternoon in El Paso, I think I was at 9% on my Apple Watch Ultra. That's incredible. And the whole time, even with those things turned off, obviously it would still tell time just fine, right? I was able to go in. Again, I didn't have access to check on the weather, those kind of things, but we were fine. We had already checked.
But you were using it for your workout. I mean, you were in the workout mode, obviously.
Exactly.
And
I
so
wanted to track
of that. Yeah.
Exactly. It did that, and it did that wonderfully. So I did all of that workout. And then I mentioned this to you as well. What I did use on the Apple Watch Ultra, which again, you don't have to have an Ultra for this. It's the Compass app. So my friend had a big, huge map, and he had like the fancy compass, the transparent compass that you would lay down on the map like we all see. And he never hardly ever pulled that out because we were looking at a mountain or a ridge over there, and we're like, I wonder what that is. And he would pull the map out, and then I would be able to look at my compass on my Apple Watch, Jeff, and I could say that is 96 degrees southeast, right? And I could tell him exactly which way we were looking, and he was able to find that immediately on the map, which I just found that to be fairly fascinating, that the compass there was so helpful in being able to see. The other thing I used my Apple Watch for all the time was looking at the elevation we were at. We went really high up and down. And if you tap on, I'm on the Wayfinder face is what I had. And there, you can actually tap and swap between the time dial or a compass dial on there. So that was always helpful. But if you tap on the little compass, and I'm going to have a video, I'll show some of this, that it actually shows the degree that you're looking at, exactly where you are. And if you could actually zoom out using the digital crown here, and it'll ping you where you are. Anyway, it's a little hard to describe, but that having that compass available was so incredibly helpful. And again, just being able to tell us like what elevation, because we knew we had to go to 8,700 feet. So we're halfway up the mountain, and my buddy is like, okay, where are we? And I'm like, well, we're, 6,300 feet, that kind of a thing. But it was just neat to kind of know and look down, and, it helped me kind of get my bearings, as it were, with where we were, how far have we come, that kind of a thing. I could look at both the iPhone on that as well as the Apple Watch Ultra. So all in all, from the battery perspective, to me, that was the thing I was most nervous about more than anything else. And then just being able to have quick access to some of those tools, like how long have we been walking? How far have we walked? I would use the workout, like you mentioned. I would ping the workout, the app on the watch all the time for that, so that I could just follow along with what it was. And then I knew that it was tracking all of that information, even if I wasn't connected, like it didn't maybe connect to my health app, or it didn't upload, to my cloud, so that you wouldn't be able to see it. But I knew that it was keeping track of all that. I could even go into my fitness app on my iPhone, and I could see that it was tracking all of that information. So, I will never walk without it. I mean, it was just great being able to have access to all of those tools, and it was just really neat how they all work together.
The regular Apple Watch would not have, frankly, it would not have done the job for you, whereas the Apple Watch Ultra did for this. So that's really impressive.
I don't think watchOS 9 obviously did add, some improvements on the compass. And of course, if I had the most recent Apple Watch 8, I think I could have gotten close to that, but I can't go back, at least for that. Like if you're on the backpacking side, being able to have access to that compass app and some of the additional functions that they had there, especially with the elevation measurements. And I think it was just a lot more accurate on the compass side. I truly do. Like, I think the Ultra was a little more accurate on that.
And it's funny hearing you talk about the compass, because those of us that just live in the urban jungles, just in the city, I use the compass app, and I generally think of, am I traveling north, south, east, west, but I don't have the real need for it that you have when you are out on the trail. And it really is, it's like, being a Boy Scout or something, all this stuff's more important. Let me tell you, when your data finally, do you mind if I disclose one or two of your numbers that was shared?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
When your data finally did sync to the cloud, I saw, for example, that on one of the days that you were there, where your green circle goal was 45 minutes. If you get 45 minutes in a day, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
You got 556 that day, Brett. 500. That would be more. That would be above The
just a
green
little bit
circle
more.
circled so many times that it almost got exhausted of circling so many times. 35,000 steps. My goodness gracious.
Yeah,
So,
it was crazy.
Adventure. So well, I'm
It
so
wasn't-
excited that you
yeah,
got a
I
chance
know.
to really, use your Ultra, for what it was designed to be used for. That's
Absolutely,
amazing.
absolutely, and it makes, again, it just made me feel like it justified the purchase on that. But just overall, I would just say, I was worried about, like, is this going to get in my way? Am I going to interfere? But I wore it the entire time, like even sleeping. Obviously, we got into our tents as quickly as possible because it gets a little chilly up there in the top. Yeah. But it was like it never got in my way. And as I said, I did take some video of some of the things, so hopefully I'll have that maybe
we'll look out for that
week or so.
Absolutely, that'll be
very
great
good
stuff. Well, so I mean, a good transition is, thank goodness everything was safe for you, because I know that there are parts of your trail where it was just you and your friend and there was nobody else around you. You're just
no one else.
But had you gotten into trouble, well, you were about a week early, but if you took this trip next week, you would be able to take advantage of the iPhone 14's new satellite emergency SOS feature, which is worth talking about. I mean, as I mentioned on iPhone JD today, if you have an iPhone 14, I think you really need to understand this, because when you are in a desperate situation, that's not the time to figure all this stuff out. Figure it out now. And even if you don't have an iPhone 14, you may be with a friend that does, or your next iPhone is going to have this. So it needs to, just to talk about some of the highlights, it's nice that it's now available. I mean, I'm just amazed that the same iPhone that's no bigger, with no extra antennas or anything like that, or no visible extra antennas, can pick up a signal from a satellite all the way up in space. It's truly amazing. And Apple allowed a couple people to test it, and it worked. I mean, it takes some time, but this is one thing that was interesting to me. I didn't understand the way that you use this feature, and this is something I think people should know. You start it by calling 911. So like you're in an emergency situation. I need help. And one of the things that Apple clarified is that you may have no cell phone connection because you're in the middle of the Guadalupe Trail, like you were, something like that. You may think you have no connection through, for example, AT&T. But the first thing that your phone will do is, if it can't get to 911 through AT&T, it will try T-Mobile, Verizon, even though you don't subscribe to those services, all of the companies share with each other for the purposes of 911. So it may be that you could actually make a 911 call, even though you don't think you have a cell signal, in which case you don't need the satellite. But if that fails, so you're truly, truly off the grid, which I suspect that you were, Brett, then the next step it can do is it says, do you want to use the satellite feature? And if you say yes, it gives you directions, and you just basically move around. You don't have to put your phone way up in the sky or anything. Just hold it in your hand. You may need to turn more to the left, and you will actually see a little graphic that indicates, okay, we found a satellite. So keep it between this little range here on the graphic on your screen. You may have to turn left, you may have to turn right. And while you're keeping that satellite in range, then you can communicate. And the phone will ask you a series of pre-populated questions. What's the nature of your injury? Where are you? What kind of things? And it will take all of your answers and then, compress them down and send that to the satellite. But then you can have a real-time communication with with somebody that works for 911. It will take between, in the best case, 15 seconds, and in the longest case, maybe up to 2 minutes to send and receive messages. So it really reminds me of like the old, 56K modems days of the 1980s and 1990s or something like that. It's slow, but if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it will work. And so work. One other thing that I thought was really cool, and then I want to hear some of your thoughts on it. And you can have your emergency contacts in your iPhone, so that if you're in trouble, like for example, if you fall down, not only can your phone or your watch call 911, but it can also alert your emergency contacts, so that your spouse can find out that you fell or something like that. One of the cool features about this is and this is optional, but if you have this turned on, when you're having the communications with 911 as you are in the middle of nowhere, you can choose to have your emergency contacts see the conversation in real time. They can't participate, so they can't chime in or talk to SOS, but at least they can see, okay, I can see my husband, my wife, my son, my daughter. I can see them communicating. I can see what they're describing the problem is. And so that way they will be able to, offer the help that they can do. So it looks like it's a really well implemented system. There's even, and I have some links, there's some ways that you can test it on your own phone without dialing 911. And when I first did the test, Brett, I actually thought it was fake. I thought it wasn't actually talking to the satellites. And the reason I say that is I was actually in my study in my house. So I had a roof over my head. Really? It was not a clear sky. and yet I could still pick up the satellite.
Wow.
Now, obviously, if I had been outside, I would have gotten a better connection. So it's cool that Apple lets you test. Now, you don't actually communicate with the satellite, but at least the activity of having your iPhone see and connect to a satellite, you can try that in the test. And then the built-in test, it has a fake conversation where you type in stuff and it responds as if it's 911. It's not, nobody sees that. It's just a fake demo way, but it's a good way to get a sense of it. So I think, when Apple announced this technology, I thought it was really cool. And now that they've announced it, I mean, Brett, if you had been in the middle, fortunately, your trip was fine last week, but imagine if something had happened and you had been in the middle of nowhere, this could have been very useful.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know if I would have paid that much attention to this, Jeff, if it wasn't for the fact that I just went on this crazy trip last week. But I will tell you quickly, before we were allowed to start our epic textpedition is what I'm calling it now. Before we were allowed, we had to go and meet with the Rangers, right? And they go through all the things because you got to pack everything out. And I do mean everything. You have to have enough water. They said, what is your phone number? Are you going to have your phone with you? And I thought that was a little curious, but they got both of our phone numbers and they said, if you are in the backcountry, you are not going to have a cell signal. Like you're not going to have it. There were a couple of peaks that you could get high enough up to where you could get some signal. In fact, when I was up on the top peak, I was able to get a signal there. And a couple of times I was able to check in. But she said, the ranger said, even if you don't have a signal, still dial 911. And so I was thinking about that. Okay, well, and I think it's exactly what you just said, Jeff, that even if I don't have a signal from me for specifically, I'm AT&T, it will try to go any kind of a cell tower, like any kind of a connection that it can. And the ranger said that we would be able to triangulate your location. And that's the way that she said it. Now, she didn't go into a whole lot more on there, but obviously they've had to do this several times to find people out there. But, first of all, that gave me a little bit of an assurance that, okay, at the worst comes to worst. And I knew that this had been announced, but it had not been released yet. And so I was very excited to see this. And quickly, just to what I think is interesting to piggyback on what you were saying is that once you start this, it goes through and you had a link to a video from Joanna Stern of the Wall Street Journal, as well as iJustine, which is really neat. It'll say first, what's the emergency? And you can say, sickness or injury, car vehicle, I'm lost or trapped.
Crime is one of them.
Crime, exactly. And then it asks another quick question. Who needs help? Is it me or someone else? Is anyone injured? Yes or no? What best describes the emergency? Are you stranded? Are you trapped, etc.? And do any of these apply? Are you in water? Is it steep terrain? That kind of a thing. I just thought that was so interesting that first it'll ask that series of questions because, to your point, these communications are going over satellite, which means that the best way to use this is to be as short as possible in your communications. And a lot of these videos that you link to were just showing some text messages, right? It's not really going to be for a phone call. It's just going to be sending short little messages.
No pictures, no audio. Yeah.
Right. And the other thing quickly, I think Joanna Stern had this, is I thought was so interesting that just shows the back end of how Apple thought this out, Jeff, is that even if you can't get direct access to a 911 sender, that Apple has apparently set up some relay stations or relay centers, right?
Correct.
That they call them.
Correct.
And I just thought that was fascinating. Like they really thought this out to make this work as best as they possibly could.
And the reason they did that is modern 911 centers in the United States and similar things in other countries are set up to work with texting. And so if your local 911, when you use this, is text compatible, then you can communicate with them directly. But for a system that isn't upgraded to texting, they will work through the relay center. And that way the Apple person will handle the texting. They will talk back and forth. And then the Apple person on the phone will talk with 911. So they will basically act as the middleman between the emergency services, who doesn't have texting ability, and you, who do have texting ability through the satellite. So so they have thought through this. And again, we're talking about the United States right now because it's currently available in the US and Canada, but it's coming to France and a bunch of other countries, the UK next month. And then it's going to go to some other places. So, there's going to be a lot more availability. One more thing that we should mention is that in addition to using this for emergency services, you can also use it in a non-emergency situation just to let your loved ones know where you are.
Yeah.
And the way that works is if you go into the Find My app, and if you've already got people that you're sharing your location with, like your spouse or your mom and dad or whoever it is, if they already have access to your Find My, you might be off the grid. But you can use your phone. You can say connect via satellite just to update my location, and then it will send the location. And so that way, if later on that day your spouse looks to see where you were, they can see, okay, well, I can see at 1 o'clock this afternoon, Brett was at this point of this mountain or something like that. So just in case something happened, I mean, they just sort of know where you are. And then if they check later on and see that you decided to, send your location from another place, they can say, okay, now I see that he's now 2 miles further. So that's sort of a nice way that you're not communicating with your spouse because you have no cell phone connection, so you can't text them. But it's just a way for them to sort of keep track of you. And I'm like, that's a cool feature. I like that. That's really nice. You can only update once every 15 minutes because Apple doesn't want you, doing it real time. But maybe if you do it once an hour or two, somebody else might be happy to get that information.
Yeah, one of the videos that you linked to is from iJustine, and I thought she did an excellent job of showing exactly that little feature you were talking about using the Find My. She talks about how exactly it's that all of her family, can, instead of calling her, just like, hey, where are you? You just have to see, look at my fight. My wife does that for me all the time if I'm traveling, or somewhere. She doesn't have to call and ping me, which I thought iJustine's video was a little bit humorous because at one point the camera pans up and she's just right outside the spaceship ring on Apple campus, right? She was interviewing. Anyway, it's a great little video. I'm glad that you linked to that.
Yeah, worth watching.
There as well. Yeah. Anything more to say about the SOS?
I think that's it. I mean, the next step for me is going to be, in the next couple of weeks and months, we're going to start hearing stories from people that used them in real world situations. And that's when it's going to be interesting because that the reality is that when you're in a true emergency, there's going to be some permutation that we haven't thought about, oh, well, what about accounting for this circumstance or accounting for that circumstance? And those will be fascinating to read. I mean, hopefully there will be uplifting stories about how somebody that would have been in a real pickle, was saved. Not hopefully they wouldn't have been dead or something like that. I feel like, but the emergency services worked for them. So
we just need a separate podcast, Jeff, that just covers all of the people that have been saved by an Apple Watch or an iPhone. Just quickly, you mentioned this, but I want to let people know if you want to just check this out, because I thought your point was excellent, Jeff. You don't want to be thinking about this when you are actually in an emergency, but you can go into your settings now. Again, all of this only applies to iPhone 14s, right? I think we should emphasize that and say that, which I think is unfortunate, but it's the reality because. But
in a year or two, all the new models.
Oh, absolutely, so, yeah. But if you have an iPhone 14, any model iPhone 14, you can go to your settings. There is an item in your settings called Emergency SOS, and then if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, you'll see a demo. So just what you were talking about, you did it in your study at the house, and apparently it worked. They tell you to be outside, nothing between you and the sky. You need to be in a clear sky. But if you wanted to try this out, just to do, because I always tell people, even with Find My Phone, do a fire drill, right? Just go through and test it to see how it works, so that when you really do need it, you have a little bit of a confidence that you've already gone through that. And so that's where you would find that in the settings there.
Plus, one more thing, Brett, when I looked at my iPhone this morning, this was a surprise to me. You know how sometimes you look at your settings app and it's got a little flag, which usually indicates, which usually indicates that you have an update that's ready to install. I saw one this morning. I don't know if you did, but I saw one this morning on my phone, and when I looked down on it, it told me that we want to, just check in on your emergency services. And it said, so if you haven't gotten this yet, I presume that you'll get it in the next day or two. And it said, let's double check your emergency contact information. Let's double check that card. Good. And they reminded me about, how to call 911, that trick that if you hold down the two buttons on the two sides for about, 20 seconds, then you'll get the screen come up and you can swipe to call 911. And then finally it said, as a reminder, since I have an iPhone 14, you can now use the satellite feature. And it's actually said, click here, tap here if you want to test it. So, so Apple is starting to make people aware of that. It's not just hoping that people will listen to this podcast and learn where to go in the settings app. Right. It's actually pushing it to people to give them a heads up that this is coming, which I thought was great.
And doing the testing. Well, I don't know if I saw that, but I tell you what I did upgrade to this morning was 16.1.1. Maybe that was out a few days ago and I just saw that. But you had a link to a story today about what might be coming in 16.2 2. We're not quite there yet, but I'm actually pretty excited about this because I think I've mentioned before how I find that my iPhone 14, I don't feel like it's just a gut feel that I'm getting the best battery life, and I suspect just because it's a blatant suspicion there that always on screen might be at fault. I have no basis for this, but I was excited to see the story you linked to today that we might be able to tweak that always on setting on the iPhone 14 once 16.2 comes out.
Sure. And 16.2 will probably be out in the next month or two. And when it does come out, instead of having the normal photo that's on your screen dim and just still be available and visible in the background, you can have a setting to make it all black. This is the way that Android phones that have this feature work. And so what will happen is your screen will go all black, but unlike the older iPhones that would just be completely black because there's nothing on the screen, it would be black, but you could still see the time and the date. So it's almost like pretend like you had a completely black picture as your background image. It's that sort of idea. But of course, because of the way that these OLED screens work, it'll, use battery life even less, which is good if it makes a difference. And some people just don't want to see a picture. Some people say, I just want to see an all black screen, except show me the time.
Right.
So I think it's great that Apple will be giving us this option in the next month or two.
Oh my! So I see the difference now. This is a great story with a little bit of little couple of GIFs there that show you exactly what we're talking about. Raymond Wong, I believe, is the author here. But yeah, I can see. And again, I think I mentioned when I was out hiking, I actually turned off the always on screen just because again that weird suspicion that I have. I don't think that's what it was, but I can tell you that it helped quite a bit. Like I feel like I was able to extend that. Now again, I was on low power mode and airplane mode as well, so all of those functions helped. I can't say that was the only thing, but this is a great little story that you linked to today so that people could kind of see if they want to know what's coming in 16.2. And like you, I suspect that would probably be out maybe in the next couple of weeks or so. Let's go back to the Apple Watch quickly. I like this. I mean, just more and more nifty little features are coming on. So this is in Apple Watch watchOS 9, which again,
it's not out yet. Well, watchOS 9 is out, but this feature is coming in the future.
Yeah, it's called track detection, but not tracking the Apple Watch. This is the Apple Watch tracking if you're on an actual running track. Is that right?
Which is fascinating because it looks like maybe it only works with the Ultra. I'm not sure if it's going to work with the regular Apple Watch, but it'll definitely work with the Ultra. And if Apple, because Apple knows where you are in the world, if it sees that you are on a track, like one of those oval tracks, like you would run if you were doing track
like at a football stadium or
high school stadium,
right?
Exactly. Then it will say, "Hey, I see that you're at a track here. Do you want us to treat this as a track? And if so, tell me what lane you're in. Are you in lane 1 or are you in lane 9?
That's
because
amazing.
We all know that the shape of the track is a little different, and it will give you more precise running measurements based upon where it sees that you are on the track. So number one, cool feature, right? But number two, the idea that Apple is so hyper aware of the world that you're in that it will notice that you're in a track. This makes me wonder, in years to come, what other things will Apple say? Okay, I can see that you are in the X location, so I'm going to give you another special feature of Y. And who knows what those will be? I mean, if you're at the park, it can do this. If you're at Disney World, it can do that. I mean, who knows what those things will be? But this is one of the first that I've seen like that, of Apple saying, oh, since you're in this type of location, I'm going to give you this ultra, very specific technical feature. So that was what was fascinating to me.
I will try this out. We're about a half a mile from our high school, and we got a beautiful track. And I got to tell you, many times I go there, and there's several people, just walking, but they're usually in lanes 1 or 2. So I typically run in there's usually 8 lanes. I'm in like 6 because I like to run a little faster, jog, and I just don't want to run into anybody. And so I'm fascinated by this because I've told myself many times I'm doing 4 laps, which is a mile, but it's like, am I doing a little bit more because I'm in 6? I don't know. I don't know how that works. I'm not a cross country runner or anything like that, but I was just excited to see that today, and I'm glad you linked to that. And then lastly, we're all familiar with iCloud. And we think about it, and you and I talk about this mostly, Jeff, because we're talking about the iCloud connections that we have, on our iPhone or using it to sync. Now, I rarely ever go to iCloud.com on a computer because most of the time I can interact with any iCloud settings that I need on my phone or on my iPad or even in my preferences pane on my Mac. But I don't use a Windows computer as much as you do. And it sounds like you typically do every once in a while go to iCloud.com, maybe to check on a mail, check on a calendar or something like that.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. So from any computer, but it's especially useful on Windows computers, just go in a browser to iCloud.com, log in. It's going to, do the two-factor thing and make you confirm on your iPhone that, you are really you. And then the big thing that happened this week is they've completely changed the interface. It makes it almost look like an iPad screen. It's pretty cool.
It does.
So it's a nice new interface. Check it out because it's worth looking at. But in terms of the usability, which is pretty much the same as what it's always been, you can access things like your Apple Notes app. So if you have a note that you've been keeping track of on your phone and you want to copy some of that text on your computer, or just the opposite, you have something on your computer that you want to paste into a note, you can do that even though normally you can't run the Apple Notes app on the computer. And so I find that useful. And you can also access your photos, which is great because you might want to download an individual photo to your PC.
I do that a lot. I've done that before. Yes.
And it's got access to a bunch of things too. The Apple Mail app, if you use Apple Mail, Keynote and numbers and pages and the calendar. And, for me, because I use Microsoft Exchange for my calendar and stuff like that, I already have that natively in my PC. But depending upon how your setup is, you may have like your work calendar, which you're accessing just through Outlook on your computer, but maybe your personal calendar is through iCloud. And so this gives you a way to access it. So if, take a look at it again. If you use a Mac, there's a good chance you can already access this through the native things.
Exactly.
But even on the map, it's worth checking out. But especially if you're using a PC or Linux or whatever other type of computer, iCloud.com is really useful.
It is. And I did not know that this was happening. And I checked it out this morning, and it really is nice. Just like you said, it almost looks like an iPad screen.
It's a beautiful interface.
You can even add tiles. You can move tiles around about, if you want to access your drive. For example, I do use my iCloud Drive folders, not as much as maybe like Dropbox or something else, but I will access that and share those files that way.
Sure.
In some instances, and the iCloud.com is a great way to be able to access that file if I'm sitting at somebody else's computer or something like that. So I'm so glad you linked to that, and yeah, it's definitely worth checking out there. In the know. The good news is I pretty much have already given my tip that I was going to talk about today with the Apple Watch. So just quickly, with the watchOS 9, which is out, I was able to go into to turn on low power mode on my Apple Watch. I believe before it was called like power reserve mode, that I think it went into automatically. The watch was still very functional even in the low power mode, and it had like a little circle at the top just to tell me as an indicator that I'm in there. But again, if you really wanted to stretch out, I can't remember. I can't see if this is the Apple Watch Ultra. I believe it's only for the Ultra, but maybe you can check your watch real quick, Jeff. But if you go into the settings app and go down into workout, there are a couple of additional toggles on there that's called low power mode workout with fewer GPS and heart rate readings. I don't know if you have that on your watch, but you can tell us.
I have a single option. Yeah, it's called low power mode. Yeah, so it might be the same thing.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now, I would tell you this worked brilliantly because, again, all it's doing is it's pinging GPS and pinging my heart rate just a fewer times, right? So in this case, I didn't need it to look at every single, few seconds that my heart, I knew I was doing fine. I knew, the GPS, we were out in the sort of the open. So I didn't need it. I didn't have a need for it to do it more than that. So that helped the battery power on my Apple Watch and extended that. Which was great. But I will tell you, when I had those options turned on, when I did initiate a workout, it would tell me, it would say, you've turned on this low power mode for fewer GPS and heart rate pings. Do you want to confirm this? And I had to confirm that, yes, that's exactly the way I want the workout mode to happen. Once I got back to the real world, the normal world, and I was able to charge up my watch, I was able to turn those off. But just some additional options there for turning on low power mode and extending the battery life on your Apple Watch.
Right. You mentioned that you had to carry everything while you were hiking. So, for example, every day that you were going to be out there, you had to carry a gallon of water with you. And that was all the water you had and stuff like that. So I'm curious, did you carry batteries with you just in case you had to recharge your phone and stuff like that? And what did you use? Because those can get heavy, obviously.
They are heavy. And boy, you are counting like every ounce you are carrying in the backpack. I did elect to carry I think I may have had 2 battery packs at one time, but they were just the simple battery packs. I knew I didn't need very much more than that. And my buddy had the same thing too. It was one of these battery packs that I've had for a long time that had a lightning cable already connected to it. So again,
and you must have used it for your iPhone, right? Because there's no way that your iPhone went 4 days.
Correct. Yeah. I did not charge my Apple Watch at one point in time. And here you can see on the screen, you can see this little yellow circle that comes up on your Apple Watch. I don't see that very often because that only comes up if you're in this low power mode on there. But I did not have to charge my Apple Watch once the entire 4 days that I was out. And again, I had all of these settings turned on.
But you did use the batteries for the iPhone.
I did use the battery one time. It was probably maybe for about a half an hour or so, probably like the second or almost the third day we were out. Like it was still doing okay, but I just wanted to top it off. Like I did not want to be without the power on there. So I did elect to take a battery pack just for that. And I just used it for the iPhone.
Interesting. Well, your tip of the day made me think of another power saving tip. Although I'm just saying, as I'm about to say this out loud, I think I may have actually mentioned this in the past, but I guess I'll mention it again today, which is this. Consider turning off 5G because most of our iPhones today, they work with 5G and it's a big marketing thing. Hey, you can take advantage of 5G. Right. But I will tell you the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is that 5G can be faster. And I have noticed within the past 6 months or so here in New Orleans, 5G is usually faster for me than LTE, but it's not always faster. Sometimes, depending upon where you are in the country or the world, 5G might even be slower than LTE. And so what 5G does do is it uses a lot more battery power. So my point is, if you're trying to stretch battery power, do you want to first of all, if 5G is not faster than LTE, then keep it turned off. You're just wasting your battery power. But even if it is faster, you might decide that depending upon some things that you're doing on certain days, it's okay for you to be able to get your emails a little bit slower, and download web pages a little bit slower, but have 5G turned off. So, and there are other advantages of 5G. 5G is also supposed to be better if you're in large crowds, which perhaps we're not doing as much nowadays with COVID and stuff like that. But if you are in large crowds, it does a better job of dispersing the network versus LTE, where everybody's banging on the same thing. So there are other times when 5G can be better. And I am still hopeful for 5G for the future. I mean, we will get to a point where 5G is so unquestionably better that no one will have a need to use LTE 4G. But today, where we are right now, 2022, they can be a toss-up depending upon where you are. So keep that in mind. I mean, if you don't really think you're going to need 5G, consider turning it off, saving just a tiny bit of battery power. It could make a difference.
And that is in the settings under cellular. Is that right? Is that where you would go?
Settings cellular, and you've got 3 choices. You can either keep 5G on, which is what I have right now. You can have it completely off by choosing LTE, or you can choose an intermediate option called 5G Auto, which is, in fact, actually, that's probably the one that I have right now, which is the phone tries to be smart enough to only use 5G when it thinks it's going to make a difference. And if it doesn't think it's going to make a difference, use LTE. I forget which one of the settings I have on mine right now, but it's one of the top 2. But if you want to just save the power, just go completely to LTE all the time and save yourself some power.
I know that we have talked about this before because I hear your words in my head sometimes when I see 5G and then there's 5G plus and then there's 5G UW. And you had mentioned, I believe one time, Jeff, that 5G plus isn't really any plus more than 5G. And I want to think it's like, oh, I get 5G plus, I'm doing better. And then I wait, no, Jeff told me that's not really doing much better on that. It's so confusing because there's so many of these different little symbols on there. It might make you feel good, but I don't know if you're getting much more, which is why I like your tip here, that maybe sometimes I just can turn it off.
It's a shame that it is so confusing and that those are all these different things, but it's just the world that we're in, I guess. That's the way it is.
It is. It's the 5G world, and we just have to live in it.
Now, and I'm just double checking here before 5G plus actually is a real thing. 5G plus is the mid and high band networks that only works with certain iPhones. If you're using AT&T. But
that's right.
But there was something else. I think it was called 5GE, which used to be AT&T's marketing term for we're on the road to 5G, but we're not there yet. And it was complete marketing nonsense. No sane person should have to remember all of these acronyms. What can I say?
Exactly. It's like 5G hopeful.
Exactly.
Like maybe you get 5G. Okay. Next week here in the United States, at least, is the day after Thanksgiving, next Friday, Jeff, which is November 25th. You and I are planning to have a podcast session, but we're probably going to try to do like a, what do we want to call it? Like a gift idea?
Yeah, sort of a gift guide. Some, things that you might
guide.
want to give to somebody else in your life who's interested in technology, or maybe something that you might want to ask for yourself.
I was just going to say, I might want to use it like, hey, lovely wife, you want to listen to our recent podcast version? We'll just see. Anyway, we will have something next week. It might be a little bit shorter, obviously, because of the holidays in the United States. But it's so good to talk with you again, Jeff. Thank you for being back, and we will definitely talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.